Good morning. My name is Susie Morice, and I'm here in St. Louis, Missouri. It's the 12th of December, 2020, and I'm here interviewing Mo Daley from Oak Forest, Illinois, for the oral history project titled COVID-19 Teacher Poets Writing to Bridge the Distance, which will be archived by the Oklahoma State University Oral History Research Program. So, hello, Mo.
Good morning, Susie. Thank you.
Could you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. I am a middle school teacher. I'm a reading specialist, and I work in Homewood, Illinois. We are in the south suburbs of Chicago. And I've been teaching in Homewood for about 9 years. And before that, I taught about 16 more years right here in Oak Forest as a reading specialist, an English teacher, and a Spanish teacher. And throughout my teaching career, I've taught just about everything from preschool to high school.
Wow, you've got a good long history in the classroom. That's wonderful. Your role as a reading teacher and as an English language arts teacher, how is that in your school? What's it feel like in your school? Give us a little context about what your school's like.
So we are a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade building. And in 6th grade, our students receive a double block of English language arts instruction. What I provide is additional reading intervention services for struggling readers. So I provide one extra session of reading intervention for them. And then in 7th and 8th grade, our students either go into foreign language or go into reading. And we help build foundational skills for them so that when they go to high school, they will have an opportunity to take foreign language then. So we're working on strengthening their reading skills.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you're a much needed teacher in the building, like all of them are, but that's a pretty critical role to play. We're here this morning to document the impact of COVID-19 on educators and on education. So if we were to go back to the spring of this year, in March, teachers found out all across the country that their schools were going to shut down. They were going to be switched to virtual teaching. And it came as a pretty sudden thing. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, what you remember and how that affected you and how it seemed to affect your school and your students.
Yes, I vividly recall that day. It was Friday, March 13th. And I recall first thing in the morning, I had a meeting with a parent and a student. And as we were waiting for the student to come down to the meeting, I was just chit-chatting with the parent. And I recall saying something like, wow, this virus sure is crazy, isn't it? And she just said, oh, it's nothing. What are you talking about? We don't need to worry about that. This is just getting blown out of proportion. And I thought, I'm not really sure, but it wasn't a topic I really wanted to pursue with the parents. We went ahead, had our meeting, and later on in the day, I remember hearing kind of some rumors on the down low and things about maybe closing early, and our spring break was approaching. So I thought, that's interesting. And then sure enough, at about 1:30, we got an email from our superintendent saying that our building was going to close due to concerns about COVID. School was out at 2:30, and we were told basically to try to get out of the building by 2:40. So we were given about an hour and 10 minutes notice, provided we checked our email too, to get whatever we needed. And we were told at the time we didn't know how long the school would be closed for, maybe a week or two, just don't know right now. So if you need anything, go ahead and get it out of your classrooms and make sure that you're good to go. And that was that.
How did you respond to that? How were you feeling about all that?
Well, initially, the information was still so muddled, I think, coming from all different sources in our state. Honestly, it was like, as I said, it was almost spring break. My first reaction was, oh, good, we get a little bit of an early break right now because I could really use that. And that turned to concern quickly because our administration is generally very forthcoming. And the fact that they didn't have a whole lot of information to share with us, that was concerning. Mm-hmm. And people just kind of stood around saying, what do we do? I remember trying to get the kids to get their things too. And again, such short notice. I'm grabbing all the kids I could find in the hallway at the last minute, saying, don't forget to take this book, don't forget to take that book. I recall helping one student who just kind of stood there in the hallway. He wasn't my student, but he was someone who clearly needed help. So I went over and said, what's going on? And he stood there, he goes, I don't know what to take. And I think he had a plastic bag, not even a backpack. And I said, okay, let's take a minute, catch our breath. Let's take a look in his locker. Anyone would have been overwhelmed looking at his locker. It was just overflowing.
Oh my.
So, I'm reaching in. Do you think you're going to need your math book in the next week or so? Yes. Okay. How about your French book? Okay. How about this? How about your second French book? Oh, I'll set that one aside and give it to the French teacher. We wound up finding 3 French books in his locker. So no wonder the poor child was overwhelmed, but just that sense of hurry up and grab and try to plan without knowing what you're planning for, it was frustrating not only for us, but for our students as well.
Did you realize that you would be teaching virtually at that point?
No.
Or you just thought it was a longer vacation, actually?
That's what we thought. That's what I think a lot of people thought at the time. It would be a longer vacation. Yeah.
Yeah. Whew. Well, there's the upside of that and then the downside of that, for sure. That was right before, a couple weeks before National Poetry Month in the United States. And we've all participated in the writing of National Poetry Month. In particular, writing poetry every day. Can you talk a little bit about your own writing and writing poetry and what that was like, even at the beginning, writing during a pandemic? How did that affect you? How did it help you? What was that like?
Well, the group that Sarah has kind of formed online with Verse Love a few years back, when I just started kind of dabbling into writing and kind of shyly putting things forward online for people to look at and to respond to and give feedback to. First of all, it's a very empowering thing. I wouldn't walk around to my colleagues at work and say, hey, here, go ahead and read my poem. Some I might, but most of them would be like, oh, that's really nice. Thanks for sharing, and go on about their business. So that community has become so important to me. And it's so empowering. So writing during the pandemic was difficult for me at first. I wasn't really sure what I was thinking. Everything seemed to happen so quickly. Things were changing on a daily basis. Things at work were changing on a daily basis. We were given guidance sometimes we weren't. Sometimes the guidance would change 2 days later. Working with the kids during the pandemic, that was such a challenge. So taking that time out and actually carving that time out, sometimes it was very, very early in the morning, and sometimes it was very late at night. But I tried so hard to make sure that I did that. I didn't do it every day. And you know what? That was okay. Nobody was there saying, hey, where's your poem from yesterday? So being accountable to only myself and giving myself the freedom to write or not write as I needed to, that was wonderful for me. That really helped me a lot.
Do you feel like that pulled you back in, to have that leeway? Did that pull you back into writing? And when did you feel that you needed to be a part of it?
I definitely think it pulled me back in. Even if I wasn't writing, most days I think I would go and read what other people wrote. And there were some days, and I look back at some of the writing now, and sometimes I would preface it with little comments like, hey, I can't do the prompt today, but this is what I can do today. And that's fine. So that was wonderful to be able to do that. And that community, it's such a supportive community. Again, no one would ever say, hey, where have you been for the last week or anything like that. So that's wonderful to know that you have those kind of friends. It's kind of like the friend that you might not call for a month or 2 months or whatever. But as soon as you pick up that phone, you just slip right back into your old habits. Or like when you're riding in a car and you don't have to talk to the person the whole time you're in the car, because that relationship is there. You don't need to worry about it filling up the airspace every minute.
Yeah. During the pandemic, um, there were there was quite a roller coaster of emotions and needs with your students as well as with your family at home, and then writing poetry, the blend of those things. Um, could you talk about that a little bit? What that was like with your family and your students, the the coming together of those three things.
Mhm. Well, the hardest part, I think, of teaching during the spring was not seeing my students in person, because what I do more than anything um, is build relationships. I can say that I teach reading, but really it's about the relationships that I build with the students. And we're working together all year long, and all of a sudden it's like, pump the brakes here. I don't know where they are. I can't find my students sometimes. Some of them were in different states. Some of them were with parents, grandparents, great grandparents. Some of them were bouncing back and forth. Some of them were MIA for 3, 4, 5 weeks. So it's like my own kids were missing. So a lot of what I did during that time was actually trying to track down students, finding them, because they weren't doing work. They weren't doing assignments. They weren't communicating. They weren't communicating on Teams. They weren't calling or texting me through the Google phone number that I gave them. So that was actually heartbreaking for me. And to know then at one point when we were told, yes, everything counts, these assignments count, kids need these grades to graduate. And I have kids who haven't done anything in 4 weeks. It's like, what? How can we do this to these kids? So that was pretty difficult. Not seeing my own family, that was crazy, because we're very close. We see each other all the time. I'm getting choked up thinking about it right now, and I've since seen them many times, but holy cow, it was difficult.
It's very, very real. Your poetry conveyed some of that. Maybe you would share at this point one of your poems. There was one that you wrote that was Tense Overdue, I think was the name of it. And I wonder if you would share that with us now.
Absolutely. I love this one. It was a prompt that our friend Glenda gave us. And this format was called a blitz poem. And so you get the idea. It's going to go boom, boom, boom. They're short phrases that just kind of the writer throws out there. And there's a lot of repetition in there too. So this one is called Tense Overdue. I'm afraid I'm losing my mind. I'm perpetually tense, intense, pretense, tense every minute of the day. Day turns into night. Day 1, day 2, day 3 are all the same stress, same house. House is a place of work. House doesn't seem like home. Home is no longer cozy. Home is what I miss friends, miss real work, friends who listen, friends who support each other, support our kids who don't understand, kids who don't deserve isolation that angers us, isolation to save the human race away from others, race to the store what we want, store what we need to walk away from technology, need human contact old friends, contact family who I can't hug, family so far away from here, but not my heart, away from my embrace the luxury to work from home, embrace this time of reflection sends my mind racing, reflection on the important things now change, important people stay the same thing day after day, same heart being torn apart is painful, apart is frustrating is something I can live with, frustrating is a small price to pay the devil his due, pay it forward with love, do.
The sense of time in that poem is really, it really struck me. When things are due, there's the rush, there's the Can you talk about that a little bit? When you were writing that, were you the time thing? Gosh, that's powerful stuff. How we are affected by a disruption of our time.
Mm-hmm. When I started I actually remember writing this to Glenda. When I saw this prompt in the morning, I thought, no way, not going to happen today. She's going to ask me to write 50 lines. Are you kidding me? So that one I walked away from. And I remember on my lunch break, sitting upstairs in my extra bedroom with my computer set up to teach with the bunk beds and the toys and everything, and the kids going, is that a train on the floor in there, and things like that. Just dealing with so many different things like that. But I remember having just a notebook sitting there, and I was catching my breath after trying to teach in the morning, and just pulling out that notebook and jotting down a few words, just a few words that were repeating those words like home and stress and friends and isolation and contact and all those things. And I also felt like this poem, I did bounce all over the place. You're talking about time. I felt like it expressed how I was feeling. Like time was almost surreal, and almost that those bullets just coming at you all the time. And some days were good, some days were bad. And I felt like this poem let me express that. It's okay to be all over the place, and we have to do what we need to do and take our time. We'll all get our due. And right then and there, that COVID-19 was the devil, and I knew we needed to pay him his due right now, and we're still doing it right now.
It's sort of amazing that here we are 9 months later, when you thought it was going to be 2 weeks, a little extra spring break.
Yeah.
Emotionally, that is extremely taxing. I can hear that in your poem. I can hear that in how you became a little bit choked up just to think about some of these things. How do you think that your poetry was received by others in that community, and how did that make a difference to you?
Well, looking back at some of the comments that some people wrote about, it's always interesting to see what other people see in your writing, things that you put there intentionally, things that are there maybe subliminally, and people pick up on that. And people use words like rawness, they appreciate the rawness of your work or the emotions that are expressed in there. And they're always looking for something valuable to say and to point out in your work. And that's so encouraging, because some of those days when it is so hard to write, and someone might say something, they don't even know what they said, and it just hits you right in your heart. And it's like, okay, I got it. I can do this.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how your students were responding to the virtual school situation? How you were missing some students, and can you talk a little bit about how your kids were responding, what you saw?
Yeah. Well, some of them were hiding for sure, deliberately. Some of them were not present, but they didn't really understand that they should be present. Again, the communication was all over the place. After, I think it was 4 weeks, I found a student in Minnesota, and he's like, "What's up?" I got his number from another student, and I texted him, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on, Mrs. Daley?" And I'm like, "Dude, where have you been?" And he's like, "Well, I'm with my great grandma." Why? Like, he literally did not understand he should have been attending school for the last 4 weeks.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Had no clue. So I think he was with his grandma, but his great grandma was back here, and she didn't really understand everything. So there was so much, not even miscommunication, I guess, just lack of communication. But I don't want it to sound like I'm blaming our school district or anyone in particular. It's just that things happened so quickly and people had to make arrangements. So this young man was on vacation. He went to go visit his grandma, normally lived with his great grandma, and he didn't check school email. She didn't check school email. Nobody knew, and no one knew where to find him. And all of a sudden he just appeared. And then it was a mad scramble to try to get him to get work done in every single class. And then as we did that, we got him back on track eventually. And then we were told, you know what? We're not going to give grades based on any of the remote teaching work that was done. So as long as the child was passing before, they're going to pass now.
Yeah.
So he wound up being okay, but we were frustrated. His teachers were frustrated. He was frustrated. His grandma, his great grandma was frustrated. Everyone was. So you ask how kids responded the same way that teachers did. Nobody knew from day to day or week to week what was going on. We might say on Wednesday, you have to get this assignment done. This is so important that you do it. And then Friday comes around and it's like, don't worry about it. So, yeah, things have changed a lot since then, thankfully. But I spent most of my time really not teaching. We didn't have a whole lot of virtual teaching. We didn't have synchronous teaching. Most of my classes were in the middle of reading a novel. And the one novel my sixth graders were reading was Ghost by Jason Reynolds, which is such an amazing novel.
It is.
It's one I like to save it for certain times of the year because I know I'm going to get them with this novel. So, we got to build up to it and whatnot. And we had, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 chapters left to go. And I didn't have enough books to give to my kids in March. Plus, I didn't know that maybe I should try to give to them anyway. So after we realized we weren't going to be going back, it's like, well, now what? What kind of work are we going to do? So, going round and round, we were able to go into school a day or two to try to get things done. People were literally copying worksheets and uploading worksheets, scanning worksheets to send those out to kids. I'm not really a worksheet kind of a teacher. So I kind of stood in my classroom scratching my head for a while saying, how can I make this meaningful? And we wound up, I had to do a little bit of research, like, can I record myself reading this book out loud? Can I send a recording to the students? Can I post it somewhere where my students can see it, but nobody else can see it? And, so we found ways to make it happen. And so many publishers were so wonderful and graceful, allowing teachers to use their materials during that time. So I did recordings of the book, and I am not the most technology savvy person in the world. I do okay. I did my recordings. They were pretty funny. The kids loved it when I sat outside and my hair was blowing in the wind and things like that. They thought that was great. And I thought, why not let them have it? So did those things. Sometimes the recordings were too long to upload. And, I'd have to have someone, my husband, help me with the technology aspect of it. And he's not used to using this kind of technology compared to what we were using at school and so on. So there were always some technology challenges along the way. Kids were finally able to figure it out, finally able to figure out how to get to videos, how to watch them. And, sometimes maybe writing the summary for the chapter or answering a question might have been a little bit too much for them to handle at the time. It was hard to let go of those old teacherly ways and expectations. The kind of, well, if we were in the classroom, you would have done this or this. Because we weren't in the classroom, a lot of kids weren't able to do the this and this. They weren't able to do the writing. They weren't able to do the commenting. So it wound up maybe just watching the videos, listening to the book, reading the book. Maybe that was going to be okay for some of the kids. We had to change a lot of expectations, and it was an adjustment for an old lady too, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for everybody involved, the upheaval is true. It still is true.
I want to tell you about another boy I had. Yes. My little buddy, CJ. CJ was probably the lowest reader in all of 6th grade last year. He also was one of the biggest kids, the tallest kids. Very charismatic personality. He is a born leader. He didn't always recognize it, but he is. He often led kids down the wrong path, including himself. And I would constantly try to talk to him about using his powers for good, not evil. And, we had a tumultuous year up to that point. There were days when he would come in and just say, I can't be in this classroom today. I need to go. I need to go sit in the office for a while. And some days I would say, nope, you're just going to have to tough it out and stay here today. And other days I'd say, yeah, maybe you should go for a little while. So he was a tough one during remote learning. He was bouncing a lot back and forth between his mom's house and his dad's house. And materials would get left in the car, computers would get left in the car, or a cord would get left at dad's house, or this or that. So there were always reasons why he couldn't do things. And once I got his cell phone number, he was a made man. So I would constantly text him and say, you need to watch this video today. Make sure you watch it and then tell me when you're done, because I have to ask you a question about it. So maybe 50% of the time he would get it done. My favorite memory was the one time I was hounding him, like, this is all, you just have to do this one more thing and you will pass this class. That's it. That's all you have to do. No summer school, no repeating 6th grade, no nothing, just do this. And he texted me back and said, can you please stop texting me? And I thought, you little snot, like, here I am, I'm killing myself. I'm answering phone calls at dinner time. I'm answering phone calls and texts at 9:30 at night. I'm killing myself for you. And you tell me to leave you alone. But we worked it out. We worked it out eventually. And I had him for a while this year during remote learning, which is structured entirely differently. And after we completed this unit, I had to tell this group of kids, okay, now you're going to go back with the other teacher for a little while. So, we've had the last 4 or 5 weeks together, but now you're going to have to go to this teacher. And he said, oh no, come on, Miss Daley, I don't want to go back there. And I just about lost it. And I said to the whole group, I said, no, this is probably my favorite moment of the year, because last year, if I told this boy he had to go to another teacher, he would have been like, hallelujah, praise Jesus, I can't get out of here fast enough. And he said, I know, things have changed a lot. So that was kind of a very sweet moment this year. So.
Success story with a student, yes, because and they're changing. You teach middle school. Middle school is incredibly fast change for students. So I to have those stories where you see a kid struggling for a little bit, and then all of his strengths come forward. That's a wonderful story.
And that is part of the beauty of my job. I kind of have a mystery job. I was the first reading specialist hired in the middle school, and they weren't really sure how to structure it. So I kind of have structured my own program. And so I am able to work with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And it is such a joy to see how much they grow and change over those 3 years. And especially those kids who are so, so difficult when they're in 6th grade, and just to watch the change over time. That's my favorite part of the job.
Yeah. Well, maybe on video on Zoom, you can freeze that. You can see the changing faces. Let's talk a little bit about the anxiety things that you had mentioned in some of your poems. Tell me a little bit about your own personal anxieties that you have had over these last 9 months, and especially when we were writing poetry every single day.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of my anxiety was due to not being able to teach the way I wanted to teach, because teaching virtually was not really teaching when the pandemic first happened. As I said, it was a lot of busy work, things that I normally wouldn't do. So to actually find materials, find things that could be engaging for the students, it was so difficult at the time. And it was forcing me to be someone who wasn't myself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because I kind of feel like I was born a teacher, and I wasn't doing it then. So it was kind of going against my human nature. I could see that my students were not benefiting from what was going on. I could see that they were not growing. The big thing with middle school kids is keeping them interested. And that kind of came to a standstill. And it was hurtful, and it was causing so much stress. I mentioned too, the phone calls, the texts, the emails. I felt that I had to be available to students and parents all the time. My husband has a pretty high stress job. He works a lot, but all of a sudden we were both working, from about 6 till 10. And we could both see that it wasn't healthy. I wasn't doing anyone any favors, myself included. But I didn't want to fail my students. So I feel like that was always going on for those months in the springtime. So that's a lot of the cause of the anxiety that I felt at that time.
You wrote a poem back in April called Night Terrors. Why don't you share that poem with us now?
Sure. They come when I'm happy. They come when I am anxious. They come when they will. When I'm with a house full of family celebrating in Colorado. When I've shared a delightful evening with my husband. When I've hiked Machu Picchu and I'm finally able to rest. The night terrors, they come without warning, insidiously creeping into my psyche, tugging at fears that are buried so far below the surface that I didn't even know they were there. They prod, they poke, they push frantically until the bony hand of the man chasing me grabs me so tightly around the throat that I can't scream. Although I'm terrified, I've never been one to keep quiet. So I try and I try and I try to be heard until at last the low-pitched groan releases from my throat, turning into a shrill, ear-splitting scream that wakes the house, welcoming them into my nightmare.
That's been a long time ago now that you wrote that. How do you feel about that now?
It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And I think the part that really jumps out at me looking back at it now is that I knew that I had to keep trying and trying and trying, and I needed to be heard. And I still feel that way today. You know, I try to be a vocal advocate for my students and for myself whenever I can. So, but it was a tense time. That was the last time I had a night terror in the spring. So,
is that right? Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe writing that poem did some good.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really possible. How has your poetry writing shifted from the beginning of the COVID experience to now? Because we're still writing poetry.
Well, one thing that I do love about the group is the variety of prompts that we get. We have so many different people that are contributing, people who are different ages, different education levels, different physical, geographical places. So that's wonderful to get so many different viewpoints. The prompts are sometimes very, very detailed and sometimes very loose. And I appreciate that as well. I love the new forms that people have pushed us to try. I know when I hosted, I did some research into different kinds of forms that I never tried. Even today, there was another fun form that I had never tried before, and that was a great way to start the day. So again, everyone just is so welcoming. And if I want to write a funny poem, I can write a funny poem. They're not all about night terrors. Not everything is gloom and doom, and that was okay too. I did notice as I looked over, especially in that month of April, that there were some funny poems, some cute poems, some silly poems, and that was good. And I love that I gave myself the permission to go so deep one day and to really put myself out there. But then the next day, I could write a poem about how my husband doesn't put away the silverware correctly. So I think it's great. And everyone is like that in the group. I've never felt judged in a negative way. And that's one of the best things about the group.
Do you find any of that translating into your teaching?
I do. I think I try to be as accepting as I can. And I try to encourage the students whenever I can too. You know, I try to approach things from a positive direction and not a negative direction. I try not to start my sentences with don't when I'm communicating with the students. Silly things, you know, I gave some feedback on an assignment the other day, and I did it in a different way. And so I asked the kids, is it better to do it this way or that way? And they were so appreciative that I asked them. They're like, oh, we like this way better. Please continue to do it like this. I'm like, okay. And then even silly things like, I said, did you guys notice that I put it in green? And they're like, yeah, we did. And I said, well, I just don't want you to think that red is always, the color that teachers use and it's always a bad thing. And they're like, oh, that's cool. We like that too. So, I do find that it translates over into my real life. And I realize it's okay. You mentioned roller coaster before,
Mhm.
and that to me is one of the best descriptors we can use for this whole time. Because once I accepted that, oh, today is a bad day or today's a great day, and just went on from there, I think everything was much easier.
Uh-huh. The one day at a time kind of
Yeah,
an approach that we're all experiencing. Yeah.
definitely.
Um, the relationships that you have with your students, you talked about one student, without using students' names or anything. Can you describe what the relationships um, were in your classroom before the COVID-19 experience and now that we're well into many, many months of very different schooling?
Mhm.
Talk about your relationships.
Well, like I said, I think that's one of my strongest suits as a teacher is building those relationships with students. Students know that they can come to me, they can chill out in my room. I always tell the kids, I tell them virtually now, the ones who haven't been in my classroom, I said, just wait, because I have the best classroom in the school. And they're like, really, what is it like? And so I tell them I have a couch and some reading chairs and some gaming chairs and a dining room table. And they're like, that does sound pretty cool. So they know that they can come in and that they can get what they need. They know that we value reading in my classroom and that we value talking about reading. They know that I will always have a book for them, always.
Yeah.
And the only way I can do that is by getting to know the students. So once I know that you're into soccer or that you're into cheerleading or whatever the case may be, I always have a book for you in my classroom. Students are never given an opportunity to not read. So the expectation is that we're always reading. And they love my classroom library. I have an extensive classroom library. They love when they notice that it's my name on the book and not the school's name. They say, so is this your own book? Yeah. And you're going to let me read it? Yep. They are just blown away. I mean, those are just simple things. But a lot of my kids don't have books at home.
Yes.
They live in book deserts. That was a big concern during the pandemic is how are they going to get books? A lot of them didn't have library cards.
Mhm.
And, it might be easy for you or me to go on to our computers and hurry up and sign up for a library card. It wasn't always that easy for my students either. And it still isn't. We talk about it all the time. I can't tell you how many times this year I have shown kids how to get a library card.
Uh-huh.
And maybe that day they don't listen to it. Maybe 2 weeks later, they'll ask me how to do it again. And so then we do that again. So
Mhm.
we're always trying, but to be able to actually touch that student and say, Susie, I read this book and I think you would love it. They appreciate that so much. The fact that I've taken time out of my busy life to say, this is for you. That's something that it's hard to do when we're online. And
Yeah.
so that's the big part of the relationship that I miss. I still am getting to know my students.
Mhm.
I still am recommending books to them,
Mhm.
but it's not the same. It's not the same as me taking a book and putting it on their desk so that when they come in, they know that that book is one that I think that they would love.
Yeah.
So I try. It's been harder this year, but I just did something. And well, I make book talks and I do usually about 3 a week. And I just record myself talking about a book. If I have the physical book, I hold it up and show them, or sometimes I have to show them my iPad if it's one I got out of the library. And I just do, maybe a 45-second book talk, and I have them play it on the announcements. And I did get a really nice grant from First Book, and they gave me, I believe it was $700 to buy books for my students during COVID. And the nice thing was they were from a certain section of their marketplace area. So there were books in bulk. So I got a pallet of, I believe, there were about 40 boxes of books delivered to my house.
Wow.
And that was in the spring. And so the challenge then was to get those books in kids' hands. So we had a couple of days at school where kids could come and pick things up, parents could pick things up, and we still were very cautious at the time. So we just basically set the books out in boxes and said, take a book if you want it. And then I started with the other books that weren't taken or books that came in later. I would just take pictures of them and put them on my team's webpage at school and say, who wants this book? I have 10 copies of this. And I would go around on my lunch break and deliver books to them in April. I got those books in April. So I would just go to their houses. And at first, a few kids were like, wait, you're going to come to my house? And I'm like, unless you want to come to my house, so that kept me pretty busy. And kids enjoyed those books. And I even got picture books so they could give them to their brothers and sisters and things like that. And First Book continues to be generous. They gave me some more money after that. And that was just asking for money. So wow. I was glad to be able to do that. But these books were not tailored to the students specifically like I normally would do. So that's a little bit of a difference. But the kids still love the book talks. I get emails every day. So sometimes I'll say, hey, here's a great book. I have 10 of these that I'm going to give away to the first 10 kids who email me today. Most of the books are not giveaway books. Most of the books are just books that I've read and want to share with the kids. And I generally say, and you can get this book at the local public library at the end of my announcement. However, some of the kids are so excited that they will email me and say, oh, can I get that book? And I'm like, that's a library book. You got to listen to the whole announcement. So I'm working hard to try to still build those relationships. And the funny thing is, a lot of the kids who email me are not even students in my class. So I'm glad that I am getting word out there about books to read. And a funny thing happened a few weeks ago. I went into school while we had some students in the building. We had about 40 students in the building at that time. And I went in at lunch to get something, and I had my mask on and my coat and everything. And there was a parent and student leaving the building, and the child said, oh, Mrs. Daley. And I said, oh, hi. And I feel like I'm really bad with masks and I don't always recognize people. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are under your mask. And the child said his name, and I still didn't know who it was. It took me a minute to realize, oh, he just knows me from the announcements. He doesn't know me as a person. He just knows that this is the lady who talks about books all the time. And I got that confirmed last week when I got a new student. And the first thing he said after he turned on his computer, he goes, oh, you're the lady on the announcements. So
you're a TV celebrity to them.
I am. In our very small town of Homewood, Illinois, I'm a celebrity, yes. So it's hard, but I'm still working on building those relationships as much as I can.
Well, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought about how your visual image is actually something that's just burned into their head now. It's like, this is just great. That's, that there aren't a whole lot of upsides in a lot of stories about how this is going. And
they, the kids in December, I've done my book talks in front of my Christmas tree. So I'm just sitting there in front of the Christmas trees behind me. And one of my students, the first day an announcement came out that afternoon, she said, Mrs. Daley, could you give us a tour of the rest of your house because it looks so cozy? Well, maybe one day, but not today.
That's pretty good. So the relationships are different, but it still sounds like that's a solid piece of it. So that's reassuring. Mm-hmm. Best practices in teaching are things that teachers have worked at for decades to find the best practices, and having students collaborate and problem solve, and using those kinds of skills. How has that affected your situation?
A great deal, I would say. The kids are working a lot differently. I still have generally smaller groups of students, so I don't have 25 students in my classes, but I have maybe 12, which for a tier 3 intervention class is still very large, but these kids are all struggling so much. Handling 12 kids on a Zoom call is much easier than handling 12 struggling readers all at once. We don't get to do as much collaboration. It's harder to give each other feedback, positive feedback, while a lesson is taking place, because you have to unmute, and two people, if you let everybody unmute, then you'll never hear anything.
Uh-huh.
So we generally have to start with mute. And these are kids who probably don't talk a lot, probably don't contribute a lot in class, in their regular classes, in their social studies or science class or math even.
They've learned to be quiet.
Yeah. And so my classroom has always been a place where they don't have to do that. We start off day one talking about how nobody's a perfect reader. Everybody's making mistakes. I make mistakes. I noticed I made a mistake while I read one of my poems earlier. I'm okay with that. We don't jump down each other's throats. We don't correct each other. Don't worry about it. I always tell them, they pay me the big bucks to help you guys out. So don't worry about it. I'll take care of that part. So they're trying. But I did notice the thing that we get the most collaboration on is technology. So when a student will come in and say, oh, I can't put my camera on today, right away, someone will jump in and say, oh, do you have Flipgrid open in another tab? Or how many tabs do you have open? Did you try restarting your computer? So they're ready to help each other out with the technology. So I think that's actually a good thing for my students, because they're struggling readers. They're still not going to volunteer to read out loud when they're in their ELA classes. But you know what? They got the tech down. They figured that out. When someone's struggling to open an assignment in Teams, they can tell you, well, you're clicking on the wrong one. Click on the 3 dots, do this. And it's great for me to allow them to do that. And sometimes I learn some things too. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely different. And I do find myself talking a lot lately about when we're back in person, or when I get to meet you guys in person, and when we get together and we can do this. But they're starting to relax. It's mid-December, and they're starting to relax. I had a kid yesterday. He came onto our Zoom call a little bit early to check something out. And he said, Miss Daley, I got to tell you something. He said, do you know this book we're reading? It's actually kind of good. I said, oh, really? Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. And he said, yeah. And you know what else? He said, last night, I started reading another book. He goes, and my friends were like, why aren't you playing this game? And I told them, I'm reading a book right now. I'm going to do that later. And they're like, who are you? And I kind of wanted to say that too. And I said, well, it's interesting how that happens. When you find a good book, sometimes you can find another good book. So, I don't do a lot of phonics lessons in my classroom. I don't do a lot of, here's how to find the main idea, because these kids have had it. They've had it since second grade. They've had it in third grade. They've had it fourth. They've had it fifth. They have shut down from all of that. Yeah. So we look for good books. We talk about good books. We share things. We get them interested. And I just start to reel them in. And then we can focus on some of the other things that they really need to get down to.
Yeah. At one point in April, you wrote that, and you used the phrase that stillness inspires me, somewhere in a poem, I think. In the midst of some of the worst parts of the pandemic, the stillness inspiring you was an idea, I think, that was really very lovely, actually. And can you talk a little bit about that stillness and how you inspire that stillness in your class?
Yeah, I think if you asked most of my friends and coworkers, they would not describe me as a still person, but I am a busy person. I have my hands in a lot of jars. I do like to be busy, but I do also appreciate the stillness. I've always loved nature. I love going on vacation to places where nature is a wonder. I try to encourage that with my own children. And as they grow older, I think they're appreciating that more and more. I think in March and April, finding that stillness was difficult for me for a while. Yeah. Part of that was not having an actual office space, an actual workspace, a routine that I would do. I would try to work out here for a day or two. No, I don't know. I try to work here. My husband was working at home at the same time. He normally travels quite a bit, and he has not left the house, I think, since February. So that's been an adjustment too. So while we're both trying to work, he has an office where he works, so that was fine for him. It wasn't really fine for me. So as I told you before, bouncing around to an extra bedroom, a kitchen area, another area in the kitchen. We were also remodeling at the time too. There was not a lot of stillness in my life. So searching for that and eventually finding it was something that was kind of helpful for me.
Yeah, yeah. Would you like to share a poem? You wrote a poem, I think, called Lines of Nature that was during that time.
Yeah, this poem was the prompt. I kind of veered from the prompt a little bit, and I believe the prompt had something to do with examining something in a natural setting and talking about how it became surreal. So I kind of veered from some of the other nature poems that I might have written. And this was when I was first allowed to see my grandson after being separated for, I believe it was about 6 or 7 weeks. And normally we see each other every week. So that was something that was weighing heavily on my mind and on my heart. And I certainly don't fault my son and daughter-in-law for it. We were all doing the best that we could at the time. But we were told, when you come, you cannot hug, you can't get closer than 10 feet, so they laid down the rules. And again, we appreciated the rules, even though they were hard to follow. And I think I wrote this as I was getting ready to go make that visit.
Okay.
And I envisioned, and in fact, I told him, I said, why don't you play a game with him? Because he was only 1.5. And I kept thinking, how will he ever understand that he can't hug Mamo? Like, how? So I said, maybe put some blue painter's tape in the driveway and make a game of it, play a game ahead of time and tell him he can't cross the line. And, we'll try to make it work. So that's where this poem came from. And I called it Details of a Driveway Visit. Mm-hmm. The blue painter's tape running down the middle of the driveway separates us so completely. Like mountains sprouted from seeds, like oceans born from salty tears, like walls fought for with hateful hearts. But how can a child understand borders? And I wanted this poem to not only be about the separation between my grandson and myself, but I was looking at the whole big picture, the worldview. I was thinking about all the children who have been separated at borders. Yes. And how difficult that is for so many people.
Very difficult, yes. Yeah. A sense of life askew, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I embraced that surreal part in that prompt there because it was a surreal visit. And I recall we wound up like trying to play tag in the backyard so that we could just keep moving. And that way we didn't have to worry about the whole separation thing. So
yeah. Yes. How does it feel now? You wrote that a long time ago now.
Yes. I mean, the hurt then was so real. We have come a long way. We have our little quarantine bubble. So our quarantine bubble includes my 3 grown adult sons and their spouses or fiancés and my grandson. And so we all have just seen each other and we're able to see each other and we're able to hug each other now. So we appreciate that.
Yeah. Creating that bubble is not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not. It sure isn't, but
very complicated. Yeah. So let's take a little look to the future. What's teaching like for you down the road, do you think? And how is it right now? And how do you think it's going to play out for the rest of this year and then into 2021?
Well, it's a 180-degree change from what it was in the spring. So we were all just kind of thrown into disarray. And again, we all did the best that we could. Our guidelines shifted all the time then. This year, we worked a lot harder. We had so many staff members involved in district level meetings to try to get everything put together. We were going to start the year as a hybrid school year. And I am a union member. I am active in our union board, the executive board. And we met throughout the summertime. We met with our state level representatives and region level representatives. We surveyed our members. At the beginning of the school year, our membership was not in favor of a hybrid school model. We were in favor of a remote model. Our union president could not make the board meeting, the school board meeting, to present all these facts and information and a letter that the union had written. So I was the lucky one drafted to go and do that. Our school board is a wonderful school board. We've always worked very closely with them. They were pushing hard for a hybrid model. We did let them know ahead of time that this would be the content of the material that I would be reading so that they could be prepared. At the time, the school board meeting was held remotely, but the board members were going to meet, and I was invited to meet at the school. So we all were on Zoom, even though we were in the same building.
Yeah.
Lots of people attended it. The school board, I think, was a little concerned that the union was not in favor of it, but within, I believe that was August 6th, and within a week, we decided to go full remote to start the year. So we started fully remote. We definitely had a plan in place, though. There was actual teaching going on, not just the busy work that we were giving the students in the spring. So that was a big relief. The scheduling for the hybrid model at a middle school was a nightmare. Our assistant principal was trying for months to make it work. We were trying to accommodate parents also. Some parents wanted hybrid, people wanted remote. So, and we've always been a district that has sought to please our parents. And that was a big, big struggle. So I think a lot of people were relieved when we went fully remote. As the months went on, so many students struggled. In particular, my students were struggling. English language learners, students with IEPs were struggling. So then we formulated a distance learning academy where we invited about 40 students into the building. And basically they were monitored either by a substitute teacher or by an ESP who didn't have another job to do every day. And so they had maybe 6 kids in a classroom, and those kids were attending their classes virtually, but they were doing it at the school building. So then attendance improved for those students. For most of the students, their grades improved because for most of these students, the issue was engagement more than anything else. They just were not coming to school. So that was a good thing. That lasted for maybe 4 weeks. And then our COVID cases started going up again. So we canceled that. So a lot of those students are back to the same habits that they had before they were in the Distance Learning Academy. So it's been a real struggle for those students who are maybe not self-motivated or maybe don't have the technology. We also have issues with some students. Every single day, they get kicked out of Zoom meetings. Every single day, they can't contribute to class discussions because there are so many people working at home that as soon as they unmute themselves, there's so much noise.
Yes.
They can't contribute. I have a student who is working from his mother's daycare.
Yes.
And it's so unbelievably loud. And he wants to read. He's dying to read out loud. And whenever I ask him to, he generally winds up shouting at the other kids. Yeah. You know, he's turning, shut up, I'm busy right now. And it's just, or kids will come in or a football will go flying right across the screen, or, you know, there's just so many different situations out there. It's truly heartbreaking because personally, I'm so torn. Right now, I'm not ready to go back to be with the students, but I know that that's where they need to be. Mm-hmm. We just recently surveyed all of our parents, and we have a goal to go back to school January 21st. for any students who want to go hybrid. So the parents had to reply by December 4th. And right now we have 31% of our families want their students to return to school. So now I just talked to the assistant principal yesterday, again, with such a low number, that complicates the schedule as well. So what might happen, and this is probably even worse at the lower grades, because staffing needs are going to change. So if only 30% of the students want hybrid, 30% of the teachers will be hybrid. Well, that means your child who is in kindergarten might have to go to a different teacher now all of a sudden in January, because that teacher might not, if that child wants hybrid and that teacher's not hybrid, oh, well, they have to go to a new teacher.
So scheduling and sorting is still a major concern.
Yeah, and we are preschool through grade 8.
Mhm.
And so it's a big, big struggle. And I get it. I get it. It's hard on the parents. I get it's hard on the kids. It's hard on the teachers. We all want to go back to normal. We're not able to go back to normal right now. So we're trying to find the best fit for everybody. And I don't know. You know, our cases are going up in Illinois.
Yeah.
Our deaths are so high right now too. Our hospitalizations are very high. Things are not getting better. So we have, with our January 21st projected date, we also have a decision date before that. So I believe it's January 8th. By January 8th, we will decide, yes, we're going back hybrid on the 21st or no. So we've already chosen 3 calendar dates for January, February, and March to say, we're going to try to go back on this day. We'll announce our decision on this day.
Can you describe what a hybrid day would look like?
So for the middle school, what they're looking at is maybe going to 4 core classes, maybe 5 potentially. Depends on the exact number of minutes they decide. It's not going to be back to a regular schedule at all.
Okay.
So a student might go to those 4 classes. We cannot serve any food in the building.
Right.
We have decided as a district we will not serve food because that's just asking for too much. The kids will be together in the cafeteria, maskless, for 28, 30 minutes. And we don't have enough room to space students out the way they should be. Yeah. So it will be easier to have a short day. So maybe the kids might go from 7:45 to 12:15, for example. Mm-hmm. And then we can provide sack lunches for students to take home with them. The good news is we do provide food right now. So everyone in the whole district can get a lunch every day if they choose to.
Okay.
But eating in the school is not an option. So then after the students go home, then they would also have asynchronous teaching. So maybe their PE class that they didn't get to go to, or maybe their French class, or maybe their reading class that they didn't get to go to during the morning hours, that would be their afternoon instruction. Yeah. And that also means, you know, as I said, the kids might have a different teacher. That means teachers might be teaching different subjects also to accommodate those schedules.
Yes. And yet today you wrote poetry already today.
Right. There's a lot going on. Yeah.
And what did that feel like today? What does it feel like to sit down and write poetry? How does it feed you?
Well, it's December and I finally feel like I'm starting to get a handle on things. So that constant juggling act of work and home and self and all that, for me, writing the poetry is a form of self-care. It's that time that I carve out. And for me today, it was very early this morning because my dogs got up nice and early. So I got up nice and early and just decided to take that quiet time to do something like that. So it feels actually really good to have gotten it done so early and just be able to have the day to enjoy ahead of time and do whatever I want to do the rest of the day.
Do you think that's something that you'll bring back to your class?
I always love writing poetry with my students. And when I tell them we're going to write poetry, it's usually a very negative response. So I love to see how they grow and change. And one of my favorite things that we've done in the last few years is we have a one book, one school we've been doing for, I don't even know how many years we've been doing. And we first started doing a celebration of that with just our reading students because we didn't know what it would really look like. And we had a family reading night. And we'd never had a family reading night at the middle school before. And we didn't even know where to go, what to do, how to plan it. And, when we talk to lower grade teachers, they're like, well, we usually have them do a project in this room and then have them do a craft in this room. And we're like, that's not going to work in the middle school. So we figured out our own way of doing things. It's been a wonderful experience. We've since expanded it to the whole school. We've had author Skypes there, but my absolute favorite part is I collect the poetry that the kids write throughout the year, and I publish a book of poetry for the kids.
Yeah.
And so each family gets at least one book to take with them. And then we keep it in the classroom to show the kids later on. It's illustrated, it has all their works typed in it. And we do a poetry slam. And that is the absolute highlight of the night. These kids, again, I've shared with you what some of my students are like, but to know that in March or April or May, when we have our family reading night, they will walk up to a mic and a gym full of 200 or more people and read a poem that they read. Like you couldn't imagine these kids doing that kind of stuff, but they do. Yeah. They do. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see.
That's pretty good. You've built a community where they feel like they can.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think is one of the most important issues that face teachers now that you've experienced COVID-19 in their teaching and in their sense of community? What's a takeaway from all of that?
Well, I think for me personally, I would say the social emotional learning aspect of it. Because if I'm going to be perfectly honest, we've been doing SEL work in our classrooms for several years.
Say what SEL is.
SEL is the social emotional learning.
Okay.
And so I think a lot of teachers in my building kind of have felt through the years that it's been shoved down our throats. Another thing that we have to do, oh my gosh, a new initiative, that kind of thing. We do it because we always do what we're asked to do. Excuse me. And I would say it was not always my favorite time of day or time of week or however we implemented it. Last year, I had a group of students who were not really very cooperative in that area. And I will tell you that I didn't have those students in my classes at all. I only saw them for 8 minutes in the morning as kind of like a homeroom, and then an extended period on Friday where I would ask them to share these deep thoughts and feelings about themselves. Yeah. It was a little bit tricky. And although they weren't the most forthcoming, we made baby steps, but it was tough. It was really tough. And it was disheartening. And there were many days when I thought, oh, if I have to do this SEL one more time. And I even asked a coworker to come and help me with it because it was so horrible. And I've been teaching for a long time. And I thought, do I really need to ask someone to help me? But I did. And it was a struggle for all of us. And then the pandemic comes. I saw the things that I saw in March and April. It was so eye-opening. And now we're in this school year. We still have our built-in time in the morning. We still have our built-in time on Friday where we spend extended time talking about goals, or yesterday's topic was nerves and things like that. And yes, it's artificial, because we're forced and we have to do this. This isn't conversations that just kind of happen as you're talking to the kids. But I see so much value in it this year. I've never seen so much value. And I know that this is what the kids need. They do need to talk about these things. They do need to talk about their feelings more. And some of them are very vocal about it. And some of them sometimes just listen for a while, and that's okay. Yesterday I had one of the quietest girls. She's so quiet. And yesterday she just chimed in here and there and was so funny and so witty. And I was like, where have you been? But she's finally feeling comfortable enough to do that. So that's wonderful to see that. And that goes along with the community building that we've been talking about. There's so many ways to build community. And I think that this is something I will really keep in the forefront when we are back in person, just to not only continue to do what I've done in the past, but to push myself to do other things as well.
That's really powerful stuff. Um, we've been talking for about a little over an hour, and I'm wondering, are there things that you would like to talk about that I didn't ask you about?
Well, you did ask a minute ago, and I don't think I answered it fully about, what teaching might mean in the future. And I will tell you that this year has been such a tough year. This year combined with last spring, so tough. And I've been thinking about retirement, and I've been thinking about it for a while. And I thought I had a date in my head. I thought, okay, in 4 years, it'll be in 4 years. And now I keep thinking, wow, I don't even know if I can continue to do this. And I don't know if everyone understands how difficult it's been on teachers, and I don't think that teachers are actively out there looking for sympathy, and that's not what I'm asking for either. But just knowing how difficult it is, I think that's important. It's difficult on everyone. The parents, we had conferences this year, and we did them on Zoom, and I've never had so many appreciative parents in my life. So that was refreshing. That was refreshing.
So there's the community is not just you and the kids, the community is the parents. Yes. Talk about social and emotional. It's not just a thing for kids. It's for the whole family there.
It was also kind of fun watching some of the parents and grandparents trying to get to the parent-teacher conferences on Zoom, because, of course, many of them have not been using Zoom at all. And, the whole, you have to unmute yourself, unmute. It's in the bottom corner. We found ourselves saying so many times to the kids in the beginning of the year, we were saying to the parents as well. So that was fun and funny to see, because the parents are getting it. They're understanding.
A newfound patience. That's pretty good. Is there one last poem that you'd like to share with us?
Yes. So this poem I wrote towards the end of the month, and it goes back to nature. We talked about it a little bit before. This is when I kind of finally settled into my little home office area, my little kitchen table nook area. And the kids think I'm hysterical, because I will randomly say things to them like, oh, there's a red-headed woodpecker in my yard, or, oh my gosh, there's a brown thrasher in my yard right now. I've never seen one in my yard before. This is so exciting. So they think I'm crazy and weird, but I'm okay with that too. But I do enjoy looking out my window. And one of the things that's out my window is a little bush that we've had in our yard forever. And I love looking at this bush. So I wrote a poem about it. So this one is called My Tiny Star. 20 years ago, the star magnolia was a mere bush in the yard when we moved in. My boys were barely 7, 10, and 12. They zoomed around the yard, throwing any and every kind of ball they could find. The tiny star magnolia served as a hurdle for their running games, losing leaves when they jumped too soon. We took family trips over spring breaks, DC, Colorado, and California. The fragrant star magnolia would bloom each spring, whether we saw it or not. But truth be told, I was always heartbroken when I saw the withered and brown petals strewn about the lawn when we pulled into the driveway after a vacation. The boys grew. Soon, the star magnolia served as a backdrop for graduation and prom pictures, casting just enough shade on my growing giants. The tiny star has now grown to over 12 feet in height, and even my 6.5-foot tall little man can no longer jump it. Since there was nowhere to go this spring, I watched from the kitchen window as her petals fluttered and fell to the ground. But I thought of the new little boy, the son of my son, who will play in the star's shade for so many years to come.
That's a lovely way to wind up our conversation this morning. This is really quite lovely. Again, you found the stillness. You found something in nature.
Yes.
The sense of community is you talked about your students and the parents and the shifts that all of you made. I think it's important for folks to get a chance to see what you said, to hear what you said.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you, Mo, very much.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you.
Okay. We'll close now.